Hey y'all, I am excited to be back here on YouTube. Excited to be back here with the YouTube community. Since taking a break from YouTube, I did start a podcast. You can find that on your favorite podcasting platform, but also here on YouTube, I've been posting the episodes. And while the podcast is all fun and good, I'm so ready to be back on YouTube, being here, showing up, and sharing with y'all thoughts about parenting, mindset, homeschooling, all the things. Today, we're going to talk about our transition to public school. And if any of our kids are back homeschooling, I'll answer the questions. Was our 2-hour-a-day homeschool plan enough when it came to our kids going into public school? Were they on level with their peers? We'll talk about what did we notice socially? Were they behind their peers socially? Did that go well? Did it not go so well? We'll talk about what are we doing now as a family? Are all our kids still in public school? Are we homeschooling? I'll give you a hint. It's a mix. We'll also talk about any regrets that we have regarding homeschooling or sending our kids to public school. And then we'll talk about what I've learned and you can take with you to help you and your kids when you're thinking about public school or homeschooling and how to make some good decisions in that area for your individual circumstances. First, a little bit of background. We homeschooled for 7 years. Our youngest started homeschooling a couple months into kindergarten, and she entered school in 7th grade, public school in 7th grade, if that gives you some kind of idea of how long we've been homeschooling. Our other 2 kids entered public school at 5th grade and 2nd grade. So those are the perspectives I'm sharing from. 1 middle schooler, 1 upper elementary schooler, and 1 lower elementary schooler. And they entered school a little over 2 years ago. The decision to send them to public school was made because we lived across the street from the elementary school, and our oldest daughters were ready to have some peers. We were not really able to find a good homeschooling community where we live. I worked really hard to try to create one, and it just never really panned out. And so sending them to public school was the option they were excited to try. We were obviously nervous, they were nervous, but we were also all kind of excited to see how it would play out. And that's really our reason for sending them to school, is just to try it out, to try to build some relationships, have some peers. They were doing extracurricular things like outside of our school days, but they were wanting a little bit more. And they also were just like, what's school like? Like, I want to try school and I want to give it a good go. So we jumped in with both feet, sent all 3 kids to school. Obviously, the first question we're wondering is, we have done homeschool for 2 hours a day or less, only 4 days a week, basically their entire schooling career. And I would say that saying we did 2 hours a day, 4 days a week, that was on like our best, most rigorous weeks, our most structured weeks. So we send them into school not knowing what's gonna happen. How are they gonna do? How are they gonna function? Our elementary schoolers, 2nd and 5th grade, and our middle schoolers, 7th grade, are surprisingly or unsurprisingly on level with their peers. There were a few gaps here and there when it came to the middle schooler, but they were filled really quickly, and not any more gaps than I would expect just a public school kid to have anyway. My answer to the question was, our 2-hour homeschool day, 4 days a week, was that enough? 100%. I really have very little doubt about that. Even with our kids with different strengths they have and different learning struggles they have, the 2 hours a day ended up being great for them. Now, I can't speak for high school, like 2 hours a day and then your kid going into high school. But what I can say is that we do have a high schooler now, and we are not seeing that the 2 hours a day up through middle school was an issue. So I imagine that entering in high school, 2 hours a day or 3 hours max would most likely be enough to keep your child on level with their peers and help them have a successful public school transition in the future if that's something you're interested in. Consistent forward progress was what we had decided was our goal, and that ended up being a really great goal. Okay, now let's talk socially. Did we notice they were behind socially? What did we notice in that area? Overall, we did not notice that our children were behind socially. We really did not know how that would play out as well, especially with 2 girls, 1 entering middle school and 1 entering 5th grade. I always said I would never let my kids enter public school in middle school because those years are rough already, but the 7th grader rocked it. The 5th grader is in middle school now. She's doing great. Like socially, they did great. And I'll speak to why I think that was a little bit later. Now, what I did notice, especially in the younger grades, was that some of the younger kids, not all, but some did have more resilience to the social setting they were in, to the nitpicking of peers than some other kids had. And our child was one that was not so resilient to that, but it also wasn't like they were less resilient than all of their peers. Some of their peers were also equally less resilient. And therefore, I don't know if that's a public school thing or a homeschool thing, but I do know, I also substitute teach now, that there's definitely a hard exterior shell that some of these kids build in order to survive the public school setting. And so some of them are a lot more socially resilient, meaning they can take a lot and not have it break them down. In my opinion, mostly just because they've built a really strong shell. Now, I would have been concerned had our child been like an outlier in the situation, but that's not what I witnessed or experienced, especially when I substitute taught. There seemed to be kids that were really socially resilient and kids that were not socially resilient. And by socially resilient, what I mean is in school, there are a lot of unmonitored comments from people, right? People taking digs or saying mean things. And then there's also just a ton of energy that you're socially having to navigate. Some kids do this well, some do not do this well. And from what I have witnessed, it doesn't seem to matter if they were public school or homeschooled kids. Now let's talk about our older kids. Our 5th and 7th grader, both are girls, and they both thrived in school. They both thrived. Now, obviously there were fears that we had with them going into school, but it just lit them up in a different way to be around peers and to start to build these connections. So that was really fun to see. It was really fun to see them both kind of grow into their own people. They already were, but now they were forming these social connections. They were getting to use the tools they learned at home in school, in real life social situations. I thought they would probably do well, but I didn't think they would thrive and light up the way they did. I do think the phrase being socialized is so weird when people talk about, well, you need your kids to be in public school to be socialized, or if you're homeschooled, you're going to be socially awkward. And the only questions that I pose there are, in high school, there were people in your high school who were socially awkward and they went to public school every single year of their lives. There are also adults who went to public school and probably even college, and they graduated college and they graduated public school and they are socially awkward. So public school is not an indicator of being socially skilled. So I just kind of find that funny that people think that. I understand that because yes, there are weird homeschoolers, but also there are weird public schoolers. So as a homeschool mom, I was not worried about my kids being socialized. Our focus was for them to learn to navigate social situations, but you don't need public school for that. All right, so where are we now? What are we doing now? Our kids entered school in 2nd, 5th, and 7th grade. They are currently now in 4th, 7th, and 9th grade. Our 9th and 7th graders, one's high school and one is middle school. They are both still in public school. And then our 4th grader, around the semester mark, we decided that homeschooling might be best. We gave it a couple more months and then decided, let's go back to homeschooling. We think it's a better fit for him and his personality and for what he needs for right now. Now, one of the big questions is, do we have any regrets, right? Hindsight is 20/20. You can see really clearly looking back. Looking back, would it have been better for them to be in school? Looking back, would it have been better to not start public school? For us and our family, I have no regrets. In that, I think our oldest two, 5th and 7th grade at the time, started school at the perfect ages. They were old enough to get it. They understood social situations. They understood how to learn. They understood how to navigate things. They understood how to come home and communicate what was going on at school. So I think they entered school at really great ages, especially with the homeschool foundation. Now with our 2nd grader, who was a 4th grader when we brought him back to homeschool, I do think him starting when he was older would have yielded possibly better results than him starting younger. But I have no regrets about him starting school because he's still him and he didn't lose any of himself in public schooling. And he did gain some resilience through public schooling. Would that have happened naturally being homeschooled? It may have, but we didn't walk that path. So I don't know. Was it the public school that helped him be more resilient? Would he have been more resilient anyway? I don't know. But there are no regrets because in the end, everything has worked out. And the goal of them trying public school was to see how it was. And that was his goal as well. And so he got to see that and see how public school was. And ultimately we decided to bring him back home, and he decided to come back home. Now, had he never tried it, there might have been more regrets there because there was this urge, this want to try school. So definitely no regrets for any of the kiddos. Now that we have done this, what do I think is best? First of all, I hate the word best, or what should we do? Don't like that either. But I can give you what we have done and what has worked for us. When we started homeschooling, we decided that we would evaluate on a kid-by-kid basis and a semester-by-semester basis. This opened up a lot of freedom and flexibility in how we viewed homeschool and how our kids viewed homeschool. So the opportunity to try school was there, and our children did go to public school for different semesters, twice for our oldest and once for our middle daughter. And ultimately, we brought them back home. There were differing reasons for that, but ultimately them trying school in those seasons was worth it to solidify that homeschooling was still the best choice at that moment in time. Now, your children may need different things. When I'm looking at older kids, not even just my kids, but older kids in general, the relationships to peers start to take a higher weight. They start to matter more, and there starts to be this really big need, this really big desire to create peer relationships. Whereas when you're younger, that need, that desire to have peer relationships may not be as great. And therefore, if you're evaluating kid by kid, you can adjust and make decisions based on these differing needs of each child. But one of the most important things to remember is that you can always change your mind. If you decide to homeschool, pull your kids out of public school and homeschool, they can always go back to school. Or if you're homeschooling and you decide they want to try public school and you decide 2 months in, no, this is not it, you can take them out of school. Now, society as a whole, we like people to continue to do what they've done. We like people to stay in jobs that they're miserable in. We like people to make a decision and stick with it. And yes, there is merit in that. In some cases, there is merit to sticking through something that is hard and building resilience there. At the same time, we have to learn when to balance out mental health, physical health, overall happiness, and start to not just say commitment, the one decision I made once matters more than all of those things. And so there were times where our kids would be in school for 2 months and we would make a goal of, okay, we're giving it 6 weeks or 8 weeks and then we'll reevaluate. We shortened the timeline to make a different decision. We created a commitment time frame and then gave ourselves the chance to reevaluate. There's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with giving yourself check-in points to figure out if the decision you made was good, to recalibrate, to re-look at the decision that you made. There is nothing wrong with that. In fact, we all probably need to do that more when it comes to decisions we make in our lives. Was this the right decision? How can I make it better? How can I shift and change this? And is it time to move on from this decision? Is it time to make a different decision? But one of the facts to take away is if you never try, then you'll never know. Everything is just a guess. So when we sent our kids to public school, it was with a guess that maybe they would enjoy it. Maybe. But had they not tried it, we would not have known if they would be successful or unsuccessful, if it would be a positive or a negative experience. All of that was just created in our heads. It was just a guess. And same thing with homeschooling. If you decide to homeschool or you're feeling called to homeschool and you just don't ever try it, then you'll never know. You won't know. You will guess that maybe you wouldn't like it, or you'd guess that maybe it'd be too hard, or you guess that you don't have the patience, or you guess your kids would be miserable, but you haven't tried it, so you don't know. So the fact is you don't know until you try. If you feel called to something, if your children are asking you for something and it's a need that they really have and it's something that is important to them, you at least deserve and they at least deserve some consideration, thought, and then make a choice, and then know that choices can be changed. You can make a timeline and then make a different decision if things aren't what you thought they would be. Now, why do I think our kids were successful in this transition, specifically our older two kids. I believe that their success was because they had a strong foundation of self and a strong foundation of learning. Meaning, the strong foundation of self is they knew who they were, and therefore, when mean things were said or bad vibes from peers happened, they had a strong enough sense of self for that to not rock them. Now, it didn't mean it didn't affect them, but it did not steer them off course of who they are and what they value and the quirks they have. And then the foundation in learning. Our goal in homeschooling was not to raise good test takers or good worksheet completers. We wanted to raise good learners, meaning that our children believe that they are capable of learning new things, even if it takes time, even if they struggle, even if they don't get it right the first time. And that if you get a problem wrong, it's just information on what you don't know. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. You're not a wrong or a bad person because you got a wrong answer. That foundation, as well as sense of self, really set them up for success going into school. My final thoughts to wrap all of this up. 2 hours of homeschool a day is plenty, especially for elementary and middle school kids. The next thing is that socially, your children will have social skills if you teach them social skills. Public school attendance does not equal social skills, just like homeschooling does not equal being socially awkward, and vice versa. Social skills are taught or they are observed and figured out. Some of your children will probably need taught social skills, and some of your children will observe social skills and start to learn them. Neither is necessarily right or wrong. It's just that they must be observed or taught, and definitely discussed when observation of social skills are not what you want them observing. The next thing is that your children will reach an age in which peers matter. As much as we hate to say it, as much as we wish they would only want us, they will reach an age where peer relationships matter. This is natural. This is normal. Now, this doesn't mean that our children no longer have a good relationship with us. What it means, though, is that they are slowly coming out from the umbrella of us and starting to step out into their own person, their own umbrella, their own relationships that do not involve us. This is not necessarily easy. This is not necessarily fun. I mean, it's fun for them, but the easiest way to think of this is to put yourself back in your middle school self or your high school self. And where did you want to be? I loved being home. And I loved being with my friends. And had either piece been missing, I would have felt something missing. All that said, if you have a community of homeschoolers and your kids are thriving there and they have peers in the ages where they really care about peers, embrace it, love it, get it, enjoy it. And then if you're on the flip side of that and you don't have that, and maybe you've tried to build that, and your children are really wanting peers and peer relationships, it may be time to start looking for other options or trying to get creative in how to build peer relationships. And then also just begin to trust that your kids know what they need. And then as a parent, help them find ways to fill the holes of what they are needing. And for us, that was trying public school because they were interested and curious, and trying public school for the peers that they would gain. And the final thing is that you are not a failure if you tried homeschooling and you decide to send your kids to public school. And you are not a failure if your kids go to public school and it's not a good fit and you homeschool them. Care less what other people think and do what is best for you and your kids. Everyone else and everything they think aren't going to follow you forever, but your children and the relationships you have with them and who they have become and who they are becoming will follow you forever. And that can be a good thing or that could be a bad thing, right? And so we work to help our kids fill the buckets that they need filled. And know that it is okay if you make a decision and then make a different decision later. It is okay to do what feels right and then do something else that feels right in the future. What to expect on this channel moving forward? Of course, we're going to talk parenting, but we're also going to talk homeschooling, how we do that. We'll talk more about this transition. We'll talk about being a family that has kids in public school and who homeschools. We'll talk about being a working homeschool mom. And I also am substitute teaching in the middle and high school around here. And I'm excited to share some of what I've learned by being around some of these really amazing kids, some of these little like knuckleheads, but they're great. What I've learned through being there with them and how that can help you, especially as you transition into being a mom of preteens, teens, going into high school, the things I've learned from them and the things I've learned from practicing it at home. Thank y'all for being here. Subscribe if you liked this video. Leave a comment with any questions you have, because I'm excited to dive in and answer your questions and get real about parenting, homeschooling, and life. See y'all next time. Bye.